These are the only 4 exercises you need to build size and strength. I'll tell you the exercises, and afterwards I'm going to talk to you about programming considerations to make sure that you're hitting all of the bases. But it really is this simple. Now, the goals here are 1, to build total body strength that is balanced and not movement specific or skill specific. Now, so long as it's not skill specific, this will build muscle. A problem with a skill-based movement like snatches or clean and jerks is that when you groove the barbell exactly right, your strength skyrockets until you're actually better off just practicing the skill and learning the skill than you are just plain old building muscle, building a bigger base and getting stronger. So, the 4 movement patterns that we have to cover are push, hinge, squat, and pull. Now, the fundamental movement patterns we're missing here are overhead pressing and carrying, but we're gonna do our best to address those in these 4 movements. Now, first movement is the incline bench press. Now, this is much better than the flat bench press for size and strength. First of all, because it's a greater range of motion than flat bench press. It's hard to conceptualize this for most people, but on a flat bench, think about the thickness of your entire body, and you don't have to bench that range of motion, where the closer you get to upright, the more that your entire arm length is being pressed out when it comes to, say, overhead pressing. Incline bench gets us halfway there. Next, this will translate both to overhead pressing and to horizontal pressing, and you can't out-skill the strength of the movements. Of course, this is working your chest, triceps, and anterior delts in a way where bench press might not be as specific. Whether you go to a very wide grip, you go to a big arch, or you sink your triceps into your lats, all great tactics for improving your bench press that will not build muscle. You cannot do those near to the same extent on incline bench press. And that's why that is exercise number 1 to build size and strength. Exercise number 2, we're covering hinge here, and this is going to be a rack pull. To me, deadlift variations are the number 1 movement for total body strength. And since we're using so much musculature, literally everything on the posterior chain, including some quads, but posterior chain from calves to hamstrings to glutes, to spinal erectors and core, to your upper back, to your shoulders, there's almost nothing that a rack pull doesn't cover outside of things like your pecs to any significant degree. Now, this saves the range of motion demand on your hip on full deadlifts, by in turn saving your back from excess pressure. We have less control over our back position than we'd like to admit. When we go down into a deadlift or down into the bottom of a squat, we need adequate hip internal rotation, and if we don't, our low back goes into a butt wink. Now, that is a trainable quality to some extent, but not as much as we might hope. So you could actually take yourself into a posterior pelvic tilt, whether you want to or not, when it comes to deadlifting. So for general advice, if you're not a powerlifter, you're not a strongman, there's nothing wrong with elevating that deadlift. Now, do I think deadlift should be part of a complete program? Absolutely. And they're covered in every program I write down at moosecoaching.com. I'll put that down in the description, programs that I write personally. But if we're going 4 exercises only for size and strength, I have no problem with putting a rack pull in here. Next up, we're able to use huge loads with shorter rest times. This means that our hormonal response will be greater. Hormones have showed to be triggered and to spike when we use higher volumes and more moderate intensities than using very high intensities with long rest times that we traditionally would in strongman and strength movements. So high volume, short rest times, increased spike in your hormones. Going to be useful. Of course, these hormones being growth hormone and testosterone, both very anabolic, both will help you lift more, both will help you build muscle. Exercise number 3, covering off squats here. I have close stance, low feet, leg press. Now, this is very particular, but for good reason. Wide stance is stronger, and you will tend to do that if you want to lift the most on the leg press. You'll tend to have your feet splay out, and you'll tend to put them up the foot plate. This is because the higher you are on the foot plate, the more it's going to be a hip movement rather than a knee movement, and the wider you go, the more we're going to introduce glutes as well as a muscle called adductor magnus to be able to perform this lift. Now, adductor magnus is a very large adductor muscle or groin muscle, but it actually has twice the torque to produce hip extension as it does to adduct our leg or to bring it into our body like the rest of our glute muscles. The adductor magnus is the reason that your knees cave in during a maximal squat. If we take that out by having our feet closer and further down, we can focus on the muscles we want to. In this case, it's going to be working a lot on our glutes and on our quads. Of course, hamstrings as well. Choosing a leg press over a squat eliminates the limiting factor of spinal erectors. Of course, if we put load on our shoulder in a traditional squat, a lot of what you're resisting is the folding over of your upper body. Powerlifters get over this by using a low bar variation. A low bar meaning it's sitting on the back of your delts rather than on top of your traps. And the lower you can put that bar, the less torque there is about the hip and the less demand on the core there is, we can eliminate that whole conversation altogether because we're training for size and strength, not just to build the skill of a squat by choosing the leg press over squatting. Now, putting your feet lower on the foot plate is going to balance the torque from knee extension with the torque from hip extension. If we can balance these two, we're going to get a really good stimulus on both of those. You're going to be using less total weight on the leg press than you might for your personal best, but you're going to use the leg press in a way that's actually going to translate to your size and strength much better. Lastly, our pull movement. We're going to choose chin-ups. Now, bodyweight exercise is not something a strongman would traditionally recommend, but lat pull down is shown to have greater contribution from your spinal erectors, which this makes a lot of sense. If we think a load is pulling up from above us, we've got our knees affixed underneath a pad, we can pull our upper body down while we pull our chest up. We can pull our shoulders down, and the spinal erectors can actually work to initiate the movement of the lat pull down, and then we try to carry momentum all the way through. It also has a less concrete endpoint than chin-ups, where it can creep up and up and up, and you don't really know where to call it. But chin-ups have also been shown to have greater biceps activation throughout with equal lat activation throughout. So we're adding in biceps without eliminating the need to work our lats. Great when it comes to building muscle. Lastly, chin-ups are also harder to cheat. You can't swing a pull-up near the same. And if you do, it's because your knees are kipping, and that's very obvious and something that you can self-correct. It's hard when it comes to a lat pull down to say, don't swing yourself back at all. Now, that's covering every muscle in the body with those four, but once we have those four exercises, what do we do for our sets, reps, frequency, and progression? Well, sets, we're gonna do 3 sets of 5 to 8 reps. This has to be near or at failure and rest times less than 2 minutes. Hypertrophic response is greatest from 5 to 30 reps. Learn that from Dr. Mike, who puts it out there all the time. So we're going to go on the strength side of that 5 to 30, meaning lowest reps possible. 5 to 8 gives a bit of a range so that you can choose a weight and you can hit something in there. And less than 2-minute rest means that we're going to get the benefit of the hormonal spike of growth hormone and testosterone from shorter rests while using moderate intensities. Now, when I say moderate intensities, this isn't to say you shouldn't be at failure. Moderate intensity is relative to your 1 rep max. So something you can do for 5 reps is inherently considered moderate intensity. For frequency, we're going to aim to do each of these movements twice a week. Whether you do these twice a week all in one workout or you choose to break it up, it really doesn't matter. For progression, you're going to progress 2 to 5% in your loads every week. This takes care of the strength component, where this is what we want to be doing to train our nervous system. For deloads, every 5 weeks, you're going to take 1 week and you do 50% of your sets and 75% of loads from the week before you kick into your next block. Now, the next block is where the real challenge comes in, because if you want to train for size and strength, you have to avoid 2 things. One, you have to avoid doing the same things over and over and over, where you'll get a great muscular response, but your nervous system will burn out and you won't get stronger. Or the other side, you choose movements so new that your nervous system is just constantly learning how to do more things. And if your nervous system is constantly learning, we're not actually getting the best muscular response possible. Think about how you start your exercise journey in the first 4 to 6 weeks. The person who was teaching you probably said, you don't actually build muscle in the first 4 to 6 weeks. And this is true because you're building a neural adaptation, but that neural adaptation doesn't build muscle, it just builds connection. So you have to try to choose an exercise that is different enough from the one you were just doing to provide a new stimulus to the nervous system without choosing something so different that you have to relearn it altogether. So let's talk about each of these and go one variation for each. Well, incline bench press could easily become incline dumbbell bench press. Rack pulls could easily be a rack pull slightly lower or a rack pull slightly higher. Your leg press could just do a slightly different stance leg press. And your chin-ups could become pull-ups. It also could become lat pull down. Just because I believe these are the 4 best exercises, it's not to say these are the 4 exercises that you should do forever. It's just a great starting spot. And really, I just want you to get a general gist that things don't have to be as complicated as you might have been led to believe. If you do basic exercises, you do them well, you progress them week over week, you deload every 5 weeks, and you commit to working really hard when you're in the gym, even if you're not in there for that long, you can make tremendous progress for training for both size and strength. Thank you very much for watching. As per usual, lift heavy, be kind, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll catch you tomorrow.